Welcome to Beyond the Ballot AZ. I'm your host, Tom Collins, Executive Director of the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission.
And I'm Gina Roberts, Voter Education Director for Clean Elections.
The First Amendment protects our right to freedom of speech, assembly, religion, among other protections we're going to cover here in this episode.
That's right. It gives citizens the tools to actively participate in democracy. And I think we have more on how those rights translate into actions every Arizonan can take. Up next.
Today we're talking with Taylor Seeley, the First Amendment reporter at the Arizona Republic and azcentral. Taylor, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, you have this beat where, your job is to cover the First Amendment for your readers around the valley and around the state. So what does the First Amendment guarantee to Arizonans?
The First Amendment really offers 5 core protections or freedoms. You have your freedom of religion, your freedom of speech, free press, peaceful assembly, and the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. The key here with the First Amendment, though, is that it's often kind of misunderstood that this is a protection for the public from the government. So you have these protections that the government cannot infringe upon. That does not, though, mean that you then have free speech rights, say, against your employer. If you go in and say something, crazy or inappropriate, you can't claim a First Amendment protection against a private entity.
So can you tell us, Taylor, with those rights, how are we seeing those translate into action taken by, let's say, the average voter?
So, there's obviously the 5 freedoms, so there's a lot to talk about, but to keep it sort of short, let's start with speech and peaceful assembly, for example. We obviously have seen quite a bit of protests in the last few months. And so when it comes to protesting, for example, you have the right to protest, to peacefully assemble, make your voice heard, express your opposition to something. But the government can enact what are called time, place, and manner restrictions. So, you could protest out on a sidewalk. That's considered a traditional public forum, sort of the most traditionally protected areas. You don't have those same protections to protest on private property, for example. But the government can, even on a sidewalk, say, hey, you're allowed to protest, but let's say at 11 p.m., we're going to cut it off. We're going to enact a curfew. Or, you're near a neighborhood, we're going to put a sort of volume restriction on it. So those time, place, manner restrictions are available to the government. The key is that they have to remain viewpoint neutral. It has to more be about regulating sort of the conduct versus the content of the expression. They cannot treat, say, a protest over abortion rights differently than, say, a protest over gun control. Whatever regulations they enact has to be uniform across the board.
So the First Amendment expressly protects freedom of the press. You're a reporter. When you are, as a reporter, when you're doing your job, how do you think about, how do you interact with the First Amendment? Like, when do you know you're involved in, you're always exercising your First Amendment rights, but when does that become real for you as a reporter?
You're right that whenever we're reporting, we're exercising that First Amendment right. I like to tell people when I cover the First Amendment that it's so critical to every person's everyday life. You engage in your First Amendment rights so frequently that it's just very easy to forget it and to take it for granted. Same goes with being a reporter. But some of the ways that the First Amendment is key to reporters is some of the common ways that maybe people in power can try to shut down dissent or stifle opinions that they don't like, for example, defamation lawsuits. You see certain thresholds for when it comes to covering, let's say a reporter writes a story about a governor and the governor thinks you got something wrong, you lied about me, and the governor sues. This is completely hypothetical. In that scenario, you're going to have to hit a threshold, not just of making sure that this factual claim is inaccurate, but you have to hit sort of a higher bar of saying that this was maliciously intended and done with reckless disregard for the truth. Like, you as a reporter, you knew the truth, you acted otherwise, and you did so maliciously, intending to harm the governor. You also see First Amendment protections critical to reporters in terms of confidential sources. It is a critical element of reporting that you need sometimes people, whether it's in the government, whether it's in certain businesses, that speak to you off the record and that speak to you in a way that you can use the information but not their name. Typically, courts have a lot of states, I think it's 49 states actually, have shield laws. And these are sort of premised on the First Amendment free press right, that we are not going to force reporters to give up their sources, because we understand that if reporters have to run the risk of divulging their sources' names, their private information, they won't have that ability to report critical information to the public.
So one of the things that we see coming from reporters as well, in addition to their beats and educating the public, but another component of that is moderating debates. And you recently moderated the Tempe City Council candidate forum, and here at Clean Elections, we're all about debates. So we applaud you for that. We love that. Can you tell us what was the debate like, and what was your biggest takeaway about the issues that the Tempe candidates prioritized?
I absolutely loved moderating the Tempe City Council debate. I think it's maybe my third local election where I've moderated an issue, and it's so fun. I've covered city halls for 5 years at the Republic, and I just so deeply love local government because it is your most intimate form of government. You can, if you have an issue, like these are the issues that are also city government, for example, is like your trash or your police or your fire, like these things that so deeply affect your daily life. And if you have an issue, the fact that for the most part, you can just go to a council meeting and say, hey, this is the issue and I've got a complaint and I need it addressed. Like, that is why I love city government. So moderating the debate was fascinating. I loved doing it because I started asking questions and I had my list prepared. And admittedly, like, you always get a little bit of nerves and I'm a little shaky and trying to be confident. But I also feel like I want to break the idea that city government has to be like stuffy and boring. This is not boring stuff. Like I said, it's your day to day. It affects your quality of life. And like, we all care about our quality of life. So as I start asking the questions, I notice that I am so in my head about trying to stick to the time and make sure that I'm being fair. And, if I prod one candidate with an answer, do I have to then prod every single candidate to make sure that I'm so fair? But then I noticed that sort of out of perhaps my own nervousness, I don't feel like the candidates are answering the questions adequately. Like, they're not getting, my listeners, the voters, our readers are not getting the highest quality information. And as someone who has covered City Hall for 5 years, I know when the candidates can say a little more or when they can be pushed to be a little more precise in their answer. So I decided 30 minutes in to sort of break format and say, okay, we're going to have some fun. Get your pen and paper out. And I just started asking some rapid fire questions and really forcing them to hone in on some of the questions that I had asked earlier. And it was great. We really then started to see some differences where, when push comes to shove, one of the examples, for example, was about budgeting. And if you are short on funds, which department or which program are you going to look to cut? And as you can imagine, when they have 2 minutes to answer versus, 2 words on a paper that they have to hold up, you really get a difference in the quality of your answers. You get more information. And so it was a really great candidate forum.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Ballot AZ. I'm Gina Roberts.
And I'm Tom Collins.